Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Sorry about the delay. I was trying to stream to both Twitch and YouTube simultaneously, and it kind of barfed on me for reasons that I'm unclear about right now. So if I don't look weird, yeah, see the YouTube there. I'm not going to be on Twitch tonight. That just turned out to be impossible. Apparently trying to do that, even the way I'm doing it, which isn't going through my own system, is taxing my computer for the first time since I got this laptop, which kind of astounds me. Anyway, I'm kind of stuck here. Yeah, it is tricky, and Starseeds player, and I apologize. I hope people from Twitch get over here because this kind of sucks. There's no good way to do this, unfortunately. Anyhow, I am trying to do it, but I'm not going to do it tonight because I tried, it barfed, and it kept barfing, so I thought, all right, screw this. Tonight, however, we will have the weekly virus statistics for Lancaster County, Nebraska, and I will pitch, and you can feel free to chime in with your own ideas. I will pitch a remake, not a reboot, not a reimagining, because those are stupid terms. I'm going to pitch a remake of the 1975 TV series Space 1999. 70% short-term capital gains taxing all of my computer. Yeah, well, fortunately, I'm too poor to have to worry about that. This is a live stream. Ordinarily, I would invite viewers to call in, but I actually have a fair amount to go over with this pitch meeting, so I'm going to forego that. But you can certainly ask me in chat any questions you happen to feel like. Let me see if I can get that up. Whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without risking this video being banned, the United States Civil War II, or even things as tonight pertaining to fantasy, science fiction, horror, and other related genres. I'm happy to answer all of these questions in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There certainly are some personal questions that I won't discuss, but everything else is pretty much fair game. I will get to as many of my viewers as I can with the understanding that I don't want my stream to go much longer than 3 hours because I am an old man with lower back arthritis and it'll kill my back to be in the chair for much longer than that. However, just before I came on, alarm went off on Scanner Radio, which you will see in my description box below. Over in Rock Island, Illinois, the Quad Cities, there has been an officer-involved shooting of some kind, and people are starting to go nuts. They're blocking the hospital. They're getting crazy. What a shock. We're in that kind of world. What's the square root of Omaha? Good idea. I don't know. During the pitch meeting, can I say super easy? Barely an inconvenience. Probably at some point I'll get through there. Yeah, in Rock Island. And then they have a forest fire going out in the Black Hills of South Dakota, which is not a good thing. Although, to be honest, they get those about every 10 years. So, now the answer to the question that nobody asked. What are the virus statistics in Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? As always, I source this with the City of Lincoln, Lancaster County Health Department, link in my description box. These stats currently are: the Lancaster County population remains roughly stable at roughly 324,216. Total number of Lancaster County positive tests is at 29,636, which is up 344 from last week. This does continue a downward trend of the increases. Yes, it's going up, but the rate of increase is constantly reducing. This is statistically identical to the minor increases last week, and the number of positive cases, by the way, that are classified as having recovered of those 29,000 is 26,451. So some people are still suffering from it, I guess. Almost 10% of the population. Well, yes, except that we only have 227 deaths. The total number of completed vaccinations is currently at 59,007, which is up 7,900 from last week. Percentage of the population, therefore, that has been vaccinated is roughly 18.2%, which is up 2.437% from last week. Given these statistics and other rates of increase, I would say the vaccine has yet to have the slightest effect. Total number of Lancaster County deaths is all the way up to 227, which is up 3 from last week. Deaths as a percentage of positive cases remains at 0.765%, up all of 0.002% from last week, statistically identical for weeks. Deaths as a percentage of the population is at 0.07%, up 0.0091% from last week, statistically identical since the pandemic appeared. There has been no change in that statistic. For reference, the number of people who died of heart disease in 2019 in Lancaster County was 485. That means that over about 1.25 years, the number of people who died of this virus remains less than half of the number who died of heart disease in only 1 year of 2019. Continue to say our press is sensationalizing this just as everywhere else. For a measly 227 deaths, less than the number of people who died of heart disease in 1 year by half, we have put tens of thousands of our people into poverty, destroyed all kinds of businesses, probably that many, that will never ever reopen again. Our press is sensationalizing this as much as anybody else, telling outright lies about the number of deaths, the number of people who are actually in the hospital, which is statistically zero. So, Space, 1999. Well, interesting deal how this started. One of the reactors I follow, one Alexa Chipman, whose website is imaginationlane.net. She is linked to below. You can find her very easily on YouTube. Simply search for Alexa Chipman. In a sort of conversation I was having her in her comments on one of her videos, we got sort of off track into Space 1999. She asked if I would actually recommend that series. I sort of hemmed and hawed a bit. I got a couple of posts. I put one out and said, well, it's not that great. And then I thought about it for a second. My ultimate recommendation was that, yes, I would recommend Space 1999. And not because it's an incredible show, because it wasn't, but due to its general impact. Because to this day, there are fan films and audio dramas being produced. You can find the fan films and stuff on YouTube. There have been at least 2 proof-of-concept videos made by fans, both of which are also on YouTube. And they generally push the series out to 2099, because we kind of already passed 1999. And they alter the rather ludicrous premise so that it makes more sense. Some of them use CGI to replace some of the now dated tech, and even one of them, and it's very effective too, I might add, and one of them even suggests editing for both pacing and continuity. They show how it could be altered in order to correct minor historical errors that were real ones at the time, as well as some minor production errors like missing sound effects, things like that, that were overlooked in editing. But that pacing continuity CGI one is really the most interesting one to me. It takes these more spiritual aspects of the show that were present in season 1, puts them in a better order in terms of the episodic nature of it, and they put them in a better context. And they even show, in fact, how you could combine and re-edit a couple of episodes to produce a season finale for season 1 that would better set up season 2, which wasn't set up at all. Hey, Jeanette, how's life treating you tonight? Doing Space 1999. One of the more interesting films was one called Message from Moonbase Alpha. And I have a link. You can't find the video, unfortunately. For some reason, nobody stuck it on YouTube that I can find. But this thing was shot at a private residence. It is a single scene written by Space 1999 regular writer Johnny Byrne. It was shot with a fractional piece of set similar to what you see behind me, and featured Xenia Merton as Sandra Bennis, who was a supporting character that Merton played during the series. It was filmed on August 29th, 1999, and then shown for the first time at the Space 1999 Breakaway Convention in Los Angeles on September 13th, 1999, when the accident would have happened. While there aren't any legal copies online, it ultimately was released on various DVD editions. And it's a real simple scene. I've seen it. It's kind of a coda to the series. And amazingly enough, it even manages to bring the whole thing back full circle to season 1, episode 1. So despite the show's warts, it has definitely had a lasting impact. And for that reason alone, I think that people would find it interesting. So that was my recommendation to Alexa. And it's my recommendation really to any science fiction fan who's not seen it. That said, the show's premise is scientifically ludicrous, and there just ain't no getting around that fact. And, generally, too, this series kind of occupies a strange, interesting place in science fiction visual history. Because if you know what came before and after, you could say, oh, yeah, I can definitely see some of these guys going on to do Star Wars movies. Male lead in this series was played by Martin Landau, who is an Oscar winner who was physically incapable of giving a bad performance. He was like Sir Patrick Stewart. Landau could say things that would sound totally clunky coming out of some other actor's mouth. One of the main supporting characters was played by Barry Morse, a British actor who was also incapable of giving a bad performance. Female lead, on the other hand, was Barbara Bain. She was Landau's wife at the time, and I'm pretty sure there was some nepotism involved. She's not that good an actress. Block of Wood on Space 1999. But if you're familiar with Juliette Landau, who's their daughter, watching the show, you will occasionally wonder if you're looking at Juliette with blonde hair. The two of them look very, very similar at similar ages. The difference being Juliette Landau inherited both her mother's good looks and her father's talent, which her mother didn't have. The episodes themselves, it can vary quite a lot, from moving to making you wonder what the frack is happening, and more importantly, why. Season 1 had an interesting undercurrent of spirituality. It sort of hints that God is explicitly looking out for the Alphans and that he has a plan for them. Unfortunately, Season 2 was produced by Fred Freiberger, the same guy who produced the rather infamous Season 3 of Star Trek, the original series. And Freiberger just totally threw out the spirituality, much to the show's detriment. That was really about the biggest thing that made it very interesting, aside from the very good production values. I'd certainly recommend the first episode, Breakaway, to any science fiction fan. Most of that occurs before the really scientifically ludicrous part of the premise, and I think there's a lot of good things about that episode. I mean, watching it, you really do believe the general purpose for Moonbase Alpha prior to the catastrophe. The production values are great. Even today, I think the special effects and model work hold up, and that Eagle spacecraft is utterly iconic and really a sight to behold. All of that said, I have occasionally wondered that, Space 1999 is one of the few shows out there that I think probably deserves a remake. And I tell you, if you watch me very long, you know I hate remakes at this point, or reboots, or reimaginings, as they're called today. They're freaking remakes, be honest. But it seems to me that when a modern artist has to resort to remaking something 40-plus years old, they are severely lacking in imagination. There have been, for example, 2 remakes of Charlie's Angels, a very mediocre TV series whose major selling point was that it starred 3 hot chicks. If you're not even my age, you don't even remember this series. So if you're resorting to remaking a mediocre 46-year-old TV series, you have absolutely no imagination whatsoever. However, Space 1999 is one of those mediocre shows that had extremely high production values compared to science fiction TV of that era. It really set a new standard. The special effects and model work were all very top-notch for the time, and it has, as I say, remained influential to this very day. But since 1975, the idea of remaking Space 1999 is something that's kind of nagged at my brain. The show had a lot of promise, and it's a shame that all the technical expertise was tend to be in the service of something kind of stupid. So today, after 46 years, I'm going to pitch my audience a remake of Space 1999. And you may feel free to chime in with your own ideas. I may very well decide to incorporate them. ITC Entertainment, the original producers of Space 1999, or whomever holds the rights right now, take note, because this could be your very next big thing. Now, I don't intend to spoil any of the meat of Space 1999. I do have to talk about the premise. I talk about some of the character names that stay the same. But certain relationships I won't talk about, and I certainly won't be talking about the plot. This whole thing has a planned 5-year story arc to it, and it varies dramatically from the original. Hey, Drop of Truth. Yes, Martin Bauer was the genius model maker on Space 1999 and many other Jerry Anderson series. Yes, and he did an amazing job, and he and some of his team went on to do things like The Empire Strikes Back. When you watch the show, you go, yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah, I can certainly see that. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the plots. Everything pretty much changes from that. But, as always, for safety's sake, we should probably issue a...
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. All hands, prepare for incoming spoilers.
Yes, it is a spoiler alert, and that is, as always, because I am a Secret Master fandom. I've changed that to be something more traditional. That means that the fandom is strong with me. This isn't a boast or a brag. This is just where you find yourself after having watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. The problem with we secret masters of fandom is that we're cursed. You just can't see all of the new stuff without seeing the century that came before, and you discover that very little is original, and it sometimes interferes with your ability to enjoy things. However, we secret masters of fandom are also in a perfect position to pitch remakes. We can call upon the science fiction of the last century, either to steal from it, which I do here some, you may not notice it in places, but I do, or to avoid it, which I've also tried to do. And modern artists should take note when we speak up. We are the guys you're trying to impress. If you can impress us, you can impress anybody. Drabasu says they'd do better to remake UFO. Well, that'd be interesting, yeah. I don't know. This is the one that's had all the impact over the years and still does. So I'm kind of, I'm stuck on this thing. Have been for 46 years. You can't remake anything without talking about the original's premise. But in this case, doing so doesn't really spoil the original. If you're familiar with Space 1999 at all, the premise is, pretty famous. The premise is that in 1999, Earth's moon is home to Moonbase Alpha, an international lunar base. Due to a massive human error, on September 13, 1999, the Earth is blown out of the Earth's orbit, and each week, it visits a new solar system or planet where it encounters humans or aliens in a rather Star Trek-like fashion. The difference is that unlike Star Trek, the Alphans aren't exploring strange new worlds to seek out new life and new civilizations. Instead, they're just constantly searching for an Earth-like planet that they can evacuate to. There are running characters, but aside from general relationships, character names, they aren't very heavily explored. What character development does occur tends to be in the service of a weekly plot. Now, the manner in which the moon is taken out of orbit is scientifically ludicrous, and always has been. It posits a massive nuclear explosion, but scientifically, an explosion large enough to push the moon out of orbit would actually turn it into a cloud of asteroids. And also, there's absolutely no way that the moon could travel between solar systems without some kind of faster-than-light drive, which the moon doesn't have. At the very best, they'd take thousands of years just to reach Alpha Centauri, our nearest neighbor, at only 4 light years away. That's the original premise. My remake premise begins on January 1st, 2199. The first season leads into the catastrophe that takes the moon out of orbit, but in a totally different and hopefully more believable way. Themes present in Space 1999 are interesting. Questions about the existence of God and whether he is explicitly intervening on the Alphans' behalf are mentioned, but never really fully explored. But Space 2199 will explicitly explore them. One of the things about being a secret master of fandom and a person who was in IT for 40 years, is that my observation is that science fiction never accurately predicts the future. It has particularly failed to accurately predict information technology advances. Now, I doubt that I'll actually accurately predict them, but I'm going to go far beyond anything seen on TV or in films, and I'm going to use this to explore questions of spirituality. Drop 2 saying Martin Landau and his real-life wife, Barbara Bain, did a fine job. Yes, I think I mentioned in my introduction to all this, my lengthy one, that Martin Landau is one of those actors who just physically incapable of giving a good performance. Not all that thrilled with Barbara Bain. She was okay. To me, her most interesting thing is she's Juliet Landau's mother. Anyway, specifically, the questions I'm going to explore in this series in a planned 5-year story arc are these. Does God exist? And does an artificial intelligence have a soul? Now, for any science fiction to be believable, you need to have a believable world. Now, with science fiction, that world is based on technology. And because I'm an IT specialist and because I don't think that any science fiction we currently have accurately predicts IT, I'm going to use that as a jumping off point for this world. In this world, for at least 150 years, there has been a sapient, that is an intelligence capable of saying, I think, therefore I am, artificial intelligence. There may have been more, but in the few minutes of the first one gaining an upper hand on the others, it completely absorbed them. That artificial intelligence is known as Victor. Now, fans of the original Space 1999 may note that I have reused this character name from Victor Bergman, but it's not the same character at all. Victor doesn't have a centralized computer complex. He, and we call him he, even though it's just it's an it really, exists in all information technology, all over Earth, and the entire solar system. By this time, we posit that both the moon and asteroids are starting to be colonized, but because of the series, we really won't get into that all that much. No one can destroy Victor, as that would mean destroying all IT everywhere. And at this point, man is 100% dependent on Victor for the existence of the species. Information technology in 2099 has gone far beyond the quantum level, which is the subatomic level we're starting to deal with, into an area that's barely even theorized today. Suffice to say that a supercomputer would fit in the space of only a few atoms. Victor is the sum total of all quantum and smaller level computers. And furthermore, quantum entanglement is used for communications. This means that all computers everywhere in the solar system communicate with what amounts to a faster than light speed. Our current experiments with quantum energy teleportation, which uses an aspect of quantum entanglement, are showing that there is no velocity between entangled atoms. So in total, all computers everywhere make up Victor, and all his component parts communicate with each other instantaneously. Now, Victor is massively intelligent, unsurprisingly. Almost anything humans do is ultimately overseen or run by Victor, from heating and air conditioning to power generation to, well, you just name it. Victor pretty much does everything. From his very hazy beginnings in the 21st century, which nobody really remembers, Victor has been benevolent. As far as anybody knows, his activities have been solely in the service of human beings, although some people do theorize that he may have been putting ideas in people's heads that have been beneficial to him. However, humanity at this point has known more than a century of peace, increased quality of life for everyone on Earth, and sanity in general. Earth is a paradise, free of war and hardship. The human lifespan is now unknown. No one has died of natural causes in at least 100 years. They may die of misadventure, doing something stupid or climbing Mount Everest and falling off, but they don't die of natural causes. Not even the common cold is a problem anymore. There's also no hunger. Advanced 3D printing combined with quantum entanglement and combined with AI has produced what amounts to Star Trek's replicators. Although like phones that we have now and email, which actually cease to be telephones, this is not a telephone. With the replicators are not called that, they're referred to simply as printers. It's just a holdover. And you can as easily print food as a sheet of paper. As a result of Victor's existence, humans have changed in many ways. It's been beneficial, but it also means that everyone takes Victor's benefits without question. They no longer perform any kind of manual labor. They're used to Victor performing all of their lower order intellectual functions. They basically become kind of a spoiled, largely lazy, entitled group of people with some exceptions. Fortunately, these exceptions exist in space travel. Space is still totally unforgiving and always will be. You can forget to lock the door on Earth and Victor will take care of it, but forget to cycle the airlock on the moon or in space and you're dead. Or at least you would be were it not some other technical advancements. And a lot of people will be dead in this. The residents of Moonbase Alpha are both intelligent and independent. And while they do rely on Victor for all kinds of things, they are still ultimately kind of explorers who understand that death can happen in seconds if you screw up in any one of a million ways. There is virtual reality exists, and it's indistinguishable from real life, except that you can't get hurt in it. Much of humanity that remains on Earth spends most of their time living in a virtual world. It's just kind of how they are. Fortunately, how we are in space is rather different. Here's where we get some interesting stuff. There are no clothes in 2199 rather. Instead, there's what's called a smart suit. And yes, my good friend L. Neil Smith, I'm stealing this from you. The smart suit is a totally comfortable, skin-tight article of clothing that covers a person from head to toe. And because it uses quantum technology to produce a comfortable, self-sustaining environment under almost any conditions. Now, you couldn't walk on the sun, but standing on a lunar surface is no problem, nor is standing in a total vacuum on Pluto a problem. The suit has no openings in it, and one rarely, if ever, even takes them off, not even for sex. Openings can be produced or removed at any time. You can kind of think of Tony Stark's Iron Man armor, the nanotech version in Avengers Infinity War or Endgame, but only it's totally flexible. It's just a thin, skin-tight thing that just feels perfectly fine, and it's not armor or anything like that. If you want to take a walk on the lunar surface, it's as simple as producing a head covering layer and then walking out the airlock. In fact, Victor will try to compensate by producing a helmet if you stupidly cycle the airlock with your head uncovered. Now, Victor also lives in each individual's smart suit, just as he lives everywhere else. You can't turn him off there either. He's everywhere. Smart suits produce an enhanced reality environment similar to what's about to be released by Apple, only it's far more advanced. And because of this, there is no signage anywhere. No computers that have physical controls. No monitors. Nothing that we'd recognize in ordinary life. Anything that individuals interact with is visible only to them and to anyone else they want to share it with. So if you were to look at a 22nd century human, you would see them waving their hands in the air, manipulating absolutely nothing. Fortunately, for the viewer, we can see whatever it is that they see. It'll either be just hanging in the air in front of them or visible as a heads-up display, something like that. There are real-world manual controls on things like spacecraft in the main mission of Moonbase Alpha, anywhere that's really kind of vital. You want to have a secondary control system in the event of a failure of Victor. And spacecraft pilots, well, they occasionally switch over to manual, but mostly because hotshot pilots like to do that kind of thing. Otherwise, it's just things hanging in the air. And without smart suits and Victor, everything would basically just be empty. Smart suits have their own autodocs, and while physicians, surgeons, and nurses haven't really been 100% replaced, the medical field is absolutely dying. The need for doctors simply isn't there anymore. And those who exist are usually specialists in a particular unusual field. And even they have constant access to Victor, and he's way better than any university textbook or even Google. And in fact, Victor probably absorbed Google within the first minute of his existence. He may have started life as Google. Nobody remembers or even cares. Smart suits operate also as both Star Trek's tricorder and a communicator. It is a mesh of sensors and communication systems. You can essentially see and hear in the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And as a consequence of this suit, your eyes don't actually need to be on the front of your suit's face. You could as easily put them on the tips of your fingers if you wanted. Look around corners. Victor is Skynet without the genocide or malice. Oh, just wait. I'm just setting all this up. This is just the world. Smart suits can be programmed to look like any clothing at any time. One could as easily look like Iron Man as Marilyn Monroe. The difference is that while you might look like a 1950s sweater girl, you'd be perfectly comfortable on the lunar surface. And in practice, from an artistic standpoint, this totally frees up our costumers. All they have to do is manufacture costumes that reflect the character of the person who is wearing them. We don't need to worry about spacesuits. The characters essentially wear a spacesuit at all times. It's just that they can look like anything that the wearer wants them to look like. There are weapons in the future. Drop 2 says the reason for the lunar base should be because it was used to experiment on wormhole transportation for dangerousness and bang, off they go after sabotage. We're going to talk about spiritual things in this. And the method and reason for the moon's disappearance is going to become very, very vital to that. There are personal weapons that tend to be built into the smart suits. Energy weapons, you just fire them by pointing a finger at something. An appropriate sighting mechanism will then appear in your field of view, and you just sight down your finger. We don't really specify what the energy weapons are, because frankly, that's too hard for me to predict that far out. They're simply, we'll just call them blasters, and there's no stun setting. They're lethal. We do sometimes have some slug throwers, but there'll be peripherals that are attached to a smart suit. Fighters, because we're going to have transported fighter spacecraft in here. They're just integral to the fighter. They're going to be either energy-based or missiles. Missiles can be fusion, fission, and traditional explosives. And all of them can be tactical, small, or strategic. You could easily blow up a crater as you could Moonbase Alpha itself. They have ground-based weapon systems, and they also are energy-based or missiles. Moonbase Alpha itself. Moonbase Alpha, in this future, started life as a command and control center for the nuclear waste dump. But because its nuclear power supplanted fossil fuels on Earth, it was decided, hey, the far side of the moon, that's a great place to put our nuclear waste. There's nobody over there, who cares? However, as fusion became more common, the nuclear waste disappeared, and really what only remains are a bunch of very highly radioactive craters. But today, Moonbase Alpha is a city, a domed city of over 4 million people. It's home to Alpha University, the Harvard of the moon. And in fact, because the moon contains most of Earth's finest minds, all of whom are hardworking, more mindful of their environment, and independent, Alpha University is actually better than Harvard. The overwhelming majority of Moonbase Alpha's inhabitants are civilian. There is a small contingent of military personnel that still run the old main mission. We can have it look like this, which was the air traffic control center, essentially. It's a holdover from the nuclear waste era. These military personnel also fly spacecraft, fighter craft, etc. And a number of these main characters are part of this military contingent. Now, because we don't want to kill ourselves portraying 1/6 gravity or less, our 2099 has artificial gravity. This is important, actually, if you think about it, if you're going to have control of gravity. It has some implications. If we have an artificial gravity, it actually kind of hints that we probably have a gravity drive, which will produce very fast spacecraft, although slower than faster than light by a long engine. But a gravity drive opens up quite a lot of interesting possibilities. But that gravity drive is actually going to be important. We have our spacecraft. Well, there's lots of spacecraft in 2199, but the one we're going to see most often after Season 1 are the Eagles. And this is where I fussed over this for a while, because it's hard to justify. The design of Space 1999's Eagles is just so damn cool that I couldn't let it go. However, because you have fusion, artificial gravity, the rocket engines used by Eagles don't make a hell of a lot of sense. We will keep them, however, as backups. The real drive is actually a gravity drive, and maneuvering, landing, also gravitic, unless they fail, in which case we use the reaction drives. Consequently, the Eagle is still virtually identical to its original design because it's just so damned cool. It is essentially a cockpit and engine structure, as it was in the original series, designed to carry different types of plug-in modules. We will largely see transport modules, but there are also hospital modules, cargo modules, etc., and you'll see them throughout. The Eagle is not, however, a weapons platform. It is a transport platform. Draba 2 says, if the suits are skin tight, then the actors will have to fit and be toned to SJW's movie. No, they don't, because, again, you can program them to look like anything. Okay, if you're, got my figure, the clothes are going to have to look something like what I wear so it doesn't look horrible. But it can look like anything. It basically stand out to be anything. You can look like a sweater girl. You can look like me. You can look like, anything in history. As I say, the point here is partly to give them a very comfortable and environment, but also to allow the costumers to do anything that they want. You're not limited by, okay, the character has to wear this. You can do anything you want. But again, the Eagle's not a weapons platform. For that, we have the Hawks. Space 1999, the original series, also showed us the Hawk-type spacecraft. And it was similar to the Eagle, though it was designed solely as a weapons platform. It was a fighter. And it was very, very cool. So we're going to keep that same design, again, with the understanding that the reaction drives we see are for backups. Space 1999 itself intimated that Moonbase Alpha didn't have any Hawks of its own. But in Space 2199, Moonbase Alpha has a contingent of them, as well as a bunch of hotshot pilot types who like to fly the things. Excuse me. Star Siege player says the suit can do the equivalent of holodeck in terms of appearance. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm aiming for. You can look like anything. It's entirely up to you. You can wear stuff like this. You can wear loud Herb Tarlick type suits, whatever happens to suit your fancy, or more particularly whatever our costumers think reflects the character. We do have a lot of commercial aircraft. It is a fully functional metropolis, so not surprisingly, it's going to have a spaceport with lots of commercial spacecraft coming and going, at least in the first year. And they can look like almost anything, right? You have a gravitic drive. You could have a ship that looks like a brick. You could have a ship that looks like a Buck Rogers style spacecraft from, the old serials. It's a gravity drive. Shape and size are a complete non-issue. Whatever you want your spacecraft to look like, that's what they look like. Now, of course, getting past the world, every show has to have its characters. Ours will be a little fluid over the years, to be honest. I have not defined them all that carefully. I had to worry about this planned 5-year arc with a couple of big ideas in mind. So occasionally a character kind of exists solely to be representative of one of those ideas. If I were ever to go closer to production, I'd spend a lot of time on the characters. But just to some of the few ones we get to. First one we start out with is one Mayor Simmons. You may recall from the original series, for the first couple of episodes, there was a Commissioner Simmons. Mayor Simmons is a British woman in her 50s. Again, this is an international thing. We see tons and tons of international. That's actually very key to the arcs itself. She's in her 50s, mayor of Moonbase Alpha. That's all she is. She's a career administrator. Rather typical human of her era, kind of lazy, entitled, bit of a coward, to be honest. And in real life, her authority is pretty limited. It's not needed because Victor takes care of most of the practical matters. But most of the Alphans kind of dislike her because she can kind of be a weasel. But fortunately, we're going to lose her at the end of season 1. Gotta make a few changes in terms of the command structure because they didn't utilize any known Earth command structure with this. Koenig was a commander. He had a captain under him. None of this makes any real sense if you know Earthbound command structures, like for the U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force. They have, ranks and stuff. So instead of being commander, we have Colonel John Koenig. He is an American man in his 40s, commander of the military base. He's a former hotshot pilot, and until season 2, he had really only extremely limited authority because it's unnecessary. Until season 2, he's mostly running training exercises. He's never held a real military command because no one on Earth, or in space, has had a war or anything like it in a long time. There's been peace for more than a century. He's been training for this war for his whole life, but it's never been needed. So when the catastrophe thrusts this leadership upon him, he's capable of doing his job, but to be honest, neither he nor anyone else ever expected him to have to do it. He is, however, in a long-term relationship with Dr. Helena Russell. She's a woman in her 40s. I didn't nail down what her nationality is. She holds an MD in nanosurgery and a PhD in nanoengineering. And until the end of season 1, she's basically a professor at Alpha University. But after the catastrophe, she's the only real qualified doctor on Alpha. We have Major Alan Carter, an Australian in his 30s, Alpha's chief hotshot pilot. And like Koenig, he's trained his whole life for wars that never happened and that no one ever expected to happen. And like Koenig, where he has it thrust upon him, he's surprised as anybody. And he is not in the chain of command. He will never be commanding Moonbase Alpha at any time. Then we have Lieutenant Colonel Paul Morrow. Like the series, he's a British man in his 30s, and he's Koenig's second in command. And if Koenig seemed kind of superfluous prior to the catastrophe, Morrow was even more so. He's capable, but in the cases where Koenig is away and he's in command, he's a hell of a lot less comfortable. Everyone tends to worry just a little bit that he might make the wrong calls, and he might in this show. He is in a long-term relationship with Major Sandra Benes, a Pakistani woman in her 30s, head of the support services for Moonbase Alpha, and also not in the chain of command. Drop 2 says, please, no Mary Wiseman. Tilly rolls are unnecessary crying. Oh, absolutely not. No, there's going to be place for crying here, but it's going to be in reasonable, logical places, and it's not going to be like Star Trek Discovery. Then we have one David Kano, a Japanese man in his 30s. He's a computer expert in a field that never needed any experts after Victor came into existence. And prior to the catastrophe, he was primarily a logical theorist working at the university. But after the catastrophe, he is possibly the most important person on Alpha. We have Dr. Bod Matthias, a South African man in his 30s, and prior to the catastrophe, he was getting his MD in nanoengineering. But after the catastrophe, he is Dr. Russell's assistant and surgeon. We have Captain Tony Vedeschi, who came along in the second season in Space 1999. He's an Italian man in his 20s, military commander of the shore police, as well as third in command of Moonbase Alpha. Prior to the catastrophe, like the rest of the military, he was training for a situation that neither he nor anyone else thought would ever happen. And if command falls to him, everyone starts to get scared because that means both Koenig and Morrow are suddenly incapacitated. Drop2 says CBS Viacom just lost 50% of their shares. No surprise there. I hope that's indicative of what's going on with Star Trek and they changed course. Finally, the one that I've named is Maya, who is an alien shapeshifter that we'll see appear here after the show starts, well after it. So I have season arcs. It is a planned 5-year arc. So the form of the series is 5 15-episode seasons, with each season having its own story arc that contributes to the larger series arc. And each episode will be self-contained. Viewers need not watch the entire season nor the entire series to enjoy individual episodes. Now, keeping abreast of the season and the series will make for a more enjoyable experience, but requiring the viewer to watch everything is just plain manipulation for financial means. Our show can run on its own. We don't need to do that. The show will be great on an individual episode basis, and it will even be better if you watch it in a given season, and awesome if you watch the whole series. I have been anything but specific about individual episodes. As with the characters, if we get closer to production, you can expect me to get extremely specific. Season 1. Again, starts on January 1st, $21.99, and will end on Friday. This is why I did $21.99. Friday, September 13th, $21.99. That's when the season ends. Seasons, Drop2 says you'll need some children for younger viewers, no human MacGuffins, like Wesley Crusher. It's a metropolis of 4 million people. Children being there are just a given. You know, it's a city. It's just a city. But our first season is going to be focused on world building, because everything I've just talked about needs at least 15 episodes to set up. And in particular, and this is where we get into the more interesting parts of it, we're going to focus on religious faiths. Moonbase Alpha, it's a city, it's international, and very interfaith. There is everything from Roman Catholics, Muslims, Buddhists, atheists. No one faith dominates Moonbase Alpha. You get a huge cross-section of everybody. Marshall says, very, very hard to do a multi-season double arc with no dedicated glue episodes. Drove Joe nutsoid. There's some of those. I'm taking my cues here from Doctor Who. Prior to the current showrunner, the episodes were individual. You could have a story inside the episodes, but they actually contributed to a larger arc that was season long, and then a huge arc that was Doctor long, and that could run years. I'm kind of taking my cues from that. I don't think people should be required to watch every damn episode of the season. So, there is, however, an exception to these religious faiths, and that's Victor. As an artificial intelligence, he has no faith, and this has started to bother him. And we'll see glimpses of it as he interacts with characters of different faiths throughout the season. So each episode will ultimately lend itself to Victor attempting to answer the questions: which is the correct religion, and does God exist in the first place? And Victor asking himself, do I, as an artificial intelligence, have a soul? Now, we won't ask this stuff outright. It's not going to be, bad Roddenberry jammed in their face sort of thing. It'll be in the background. We don't want to tip our hand to the audience. Season 1 ends extremely abruptly and completely mid-sentence. The moon simply disappears from Earth's orbit. One moment it's there, and the next it's gone. So season 2 is going to begin immediately after the moon disappears. Finishing their various sentences all over Alpha, we find we're in the midst of a complete catastrophe. Earth and the entire solar system are gone from Alpha's perspectives, and all of the gravitic and tidal influences are gone. The moon is undergoing massive moonquakes, and over 1 million people die in the first 10 minutes. Drop2 says, sounds like there's a slight Stargate universe vibe to it. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. In a little way, yeah. So the first 1 million die in the first 10 minutes. Another 1 million people die over the course of the next week. And not only is Earth and the solar system gone, but so is Victor. It was thought totally impossible, but he's gone. And the Alphans are suddenly independent. All of the stuff that they relied on is gone. And it's totally outside anyone's experience. Thousands of Alphans, in fact, intentionally space themselves at the thought of having to cope with everything themselves. Every neurosis and fear is activated and acted upon. By the end of the third week, Alpha's population is down from 4 million to about 1.5 million. Men, women, children, was totally indiscriminate. The survivors are the hardiest ones of the bunch, and the entire season is going to be focused on nothing but relearning technologies that were formerly automated by Victor. Drop of Two says, I have UFO in Space 1999 on Blu-ray. Cool. Bought them last Christmas. Had to import them from the UK. Oh, that's cool. You can find both of them around. A fair percentage, if not all of them, are both on YouTube, probably in violation of copyright. As with prior seasons, there's going to be spiritual undercurrent for much the same reasons. When terrible things happen like this, people are going to turn to faith. Season 2 will end with the shocking revelation that all of this, including Victor's death, was caused by Victor himself. Starships player has Tubi has both legally. Oh, cool. Okay, go to Tubi and do it legally. Yeah. Season 3 is going to concern figuring out what happened, how, and if the moon can get back to Earth. They have learned that they're in the middle of empty space, about 5 light years past Sirius, but there's no one or anything there. It is empty space. By the end, they will have figured out what happened, and for unknown reasons, this is what went down. Victor used a peculiar aspect of quantum entanglement to essentially teleport the moon from its present location, and in the process, this disconnected all of Victor's component parts, hence killing him. It was a very elaborate way, apparently, of committing suicide, and probably the only possible way that he could commit suicide. Now, why Victor would want to commit suicide is anybody's guess. And as with prior seasons, there'll be a spiritual undercurrent. The same reasons, when horrible things happen, people often turn to faith. Marshall says, societal castaway in space. Interesting. Yeah. At the final episode of the season will finally end with Koenig flipping the switch to see if they can get back to the edge of the solar system. They had, however, figured out that they can't go back to Earth orbit. This is just plain impossible. Edge of the solar system, reasonably safe, and they can use the Eagles to evacuate to Earth, assuming there's anything to evacuate to. Loss of the moon may very well have destroyed civilization on Earth. Asteroid belt may be their best bet. End of the season, last moment of the instant of the season, flips the switch, and the moon disappears, that season ends. You wanted the documentaries and commentaries? Yeah, those are absolutely cool. Yeah, no question. Some of the behind-the-scenes stuff would be fascinating to hear people talk about, yeah. Season 4, we pick up right where we left off. They reappear somewhere, and it doesn't work. All that happens was they popped into existence at the edge of the nearest star's gravity well. Turns out the only thing they can control is they'll end up at the edge of some solar system's gravity well somewhere. Returning to Earth isn't an option and could only happen by pure random chance. They don't know where they'll pop into existence. This entire season will consist of episodes by flipping the switch, and the next episode beginning at the near some new star. Sometimes we'll end up somewhere useful, flip the switch, nowhere useful rather. We'll just wind up, okay, this is a crapshoot, nothing happened here. Flip the switch repeatedly during an episode. Sometimes we'll spend an episode in a system which is a good candidate for evacuation, only to discover for some reason it's not suitable. We will occasionally see humanoid aliens, and that totally surprises everybody because it should be evolutionarily impossible to have humanoids on alien planets. It's kind of a big deal. We'll talk about that in later seasons. Some of them have their own religions that are sometimes compatible with an Earth religion, sometimes not. Gives us an opportunity to look at Earth's religions kind of from the outside rather than from the inside, which is what we've been doing in previous seasons. Along the way, we pick up Maya. She is like in the series, she's the last survivor of a doomed candidate world that doesn't work out. If we can work it, we'll get Brian Blessed in there to play something. And if we can work it, we'll have a character in there whose name is Gordon, so that Brian Blessed gets the, we do a little fan service. Brian Blessed can say, Gordon's alive. It'll be super easy, barely an inconvenience. Vaguely similar to Galactus' Search for Earth. Vaguely, but only vaguely. I'm heavily concentrating on the spiritual aspects of things. In any case, Maya ends up being a massive computer expert and what she does in remaining seasons is going to be key to finding out what in the hell happened to Victor. But she will become romantically involved with Tony as she was in the original season. Season 4 ends, Koenig flipping the switch. Season 5 begins with Alpha appearing at the edge of a star system with a good candidate planet. Several episodes will be spent establishing that this is it. This is the one that they've been looking for. Sarsi's player says, kind of like Sliders, except without the forced timer countdown. Yeah, in a way. They're just, it's a whole new kind of space drive. It's a quantum entanglement drive. That's my thought about it. So mid-season, they will begin Operation Exodus, the evacuation from Moonbase Alpha. They will also discover that the planet isn't quite what they thought it was. In fact, it was the birthplace of the progenitor of the human race, and they left for other planets roughly 200,000 years ago. Earth is only one of the planets they colonized. In fact, all of the humanoids that they found in Season 4 were actually colonists originally of this planet, and they've long since forgotten where they came from. The Alphans will call this planet Arcadia, and if you're familiar with the original series, you'll get the reference. And the latter half of the season is going to be all about evacuation, colonization, the things that you run into, because there are real stories there. During the next to last episode, Maya will succeed in resuscitating Victor after a fashion, because after damn near killing them all in an attempt to commit suicide, no one wants him really up and running, but they do want to know why the hell he did this to them. The answer is more straightforward than you'd think. In his utterly logical way, and with no concern for others, he hasn't really had any concern for others all along. It's just been to his advantage to have things happen the way they did. Victor was trying to answer the questions, which religion is right, and do I have a soul? Drapazu says, TND did the whole panspermia thing. Yeah. Trying not to do that here. It's just colonization. But to find out these answers, Victor decided logically that the only way to find out was to die. Unfortunately, he couldn't die. His very existence and that of humanity was predicated on the fact that he couldn't be destroyed. His only way out was to create a condition under which he could die, and that was the total disconnection and separation of the systems that made him up. And his only chance for that was to disconnect the moon. Brian Cox should be the voiceover of Victor. Somebody, my thing is, if he was still alive, I'd like to have Barry Morse to him. And it isn't necessarily just a voiceover. I expect, we're talking about 2199. You might have avatars of him show up, as holograms, essentially. So Victor, actually, in killing himself, was able to find his answers, but he's not telling. He actually knows which religion is or not correct, and he knows whether or not he has a soul. But he has decided that for the future of Alphans and what's left of humanity on Earth, they cannot know the answers for certain. It would destroy their civilization to know for sure, because that's how faith works. You don't find out for sure in life. So Victor just wants to be turned back off and never to be turned on again. So at the end of the series, the last of Alpha's inhabitants, Koenig, Carter, and a bunch of hotshot pilots, transfer all of the nuclear waste from the far side and dump it onto Alpha. The entire area and things that made up Victor will be radioactive for long after they've built a new civilization on Arcadia, and that will stop anybody from ever turning Victor back on. Drop 2 says the Victor avatars need not look human. Absolutely. We're talking about, this is one of those deals where they have the technology to do a whole bunch of really fascinating stuff. By taking the IT in the direction that I have, you're looking at the ability to do holograms, virtual interfaces, all kinds of cool stuff. So the very end of the final episode, we'll have Koenig saying his last goodbyes to Victor, flipping the off switch, and then darkness. The end. That is my pitch for Space 2199. I probably didn't make as huge a big deal about the religious aspects in Season 1 that I could have. My thought is that Victor is going to spend a lot of time in watching people's relationships, and if you had have an episode dealing with the Roman Catholic and you might talk about that. You might have someone dealing with a Muslim or a Hindu or a Taoist or a born-again Christian. Every episode will be something different. So it's, again, his quest to find out, does God exist? If so, which religion is the right one? And do I have a soul? And his ability to come back, he isn't really back per se. It's not like his whole intelligence is back when they turn him back on. To begin with, nobody wants that. He destroyed civilization as they knew it. They're not going to turn him back on per se. It's kind of a zombie sort of situation. Drop 2 says, I'd like my own Zoe Saldana blue cat. Well, sure, why not? It's just like clothing, anything at all. Like I say, if you could get Barry Morse back, he's the guy I envision starting out with Victor. Drop 2 says, reminds me of James Blish's A Case of Conscience. You just mentioned something that I don't know about. If I accidentally stole ideas, it was totally unintended. I steal stuff, no question. I rip stuff off, but I'm trying to rip off the cool stuff if I can possibly do it. My whole thought on this is what really made Space 99 interesting and set it apart from any other show on there, in addition to the really good production values, was the fact that the first season had this undercurrent of spirituality in it that, wasn't really addressed, and season 2, it was just gone. To me, that's the more interesting part of the show. So, hey, let's concentrate on that. Let's ask the big unanswerable questions. And, somebody knowing me, I'm an atheist. My whole thing at the end is just that we can't know. Even if something finds out, we really can't know. It would screw us up in a major way to know for sure, for absolute certainty, what things look like after death, who's right, who's wrong. It would really screw things up. We just can't know. And Victor, being super intelligent, knows that we can't know. It would screw us all up. You got to take it on faith. That is the ultimate end of the series. Drop 2 says, Jesuits land on a planet of intelligent lizards have no theology. The Jesuits seek to make them Catholic with mixed results. Sure. You can have an episode like that when they're moving from planet to planet. Absolutely. No reason that you couldn't. You could have, I don't know, any of the main characters be Jesuit when they land on this thing. And it could be any number of religions where they land someplace that has no religion. They say, okay, we got to convert these people. We have to bring them closer to God. No reason you couldn't. The whole point of this is to examine these big questions, again, from the perspective of a super intelligent AI that decides the only way to find out is to die. And he's so integrated with everything in the universe that in the solar system, only way he can die is by disconnecting a chunk of himself. So it's that's the whole thing, and the best that I can do in terms of keeping true to some of the original intent, the premise with the moon moving around and stuff like that. Marshall says, you feel ignored. Okay, sorry, did I miss something that you said? I saw some of the stuff that you said, but there's a lot of ideas I've stolen, and I know it. Particularly the smart suits. I have totally ripped them off almost wholesale from libertarian science fiction author L. Neil Smith. If you don't know who he is, his books are very fascinating. He has an entire series called it falls under the sort of Galactic Confederacy kind of umbrella, a whole series of novels, and he's very libertarian. So the world that he posits, the future he posits, is extremely libertarian. There's really no central governments. I dare you to do that in outer space anyway. I dare you to have a world government, for that matter. I dare you to have one. I certainly dare you to have one that spans the solar system, and I can't imagine a real way that you would have a galactic government. The distances are too vast. There are too many people. You wouldn't have the right communication. You wouldn't have the speed. I just don't think you could do it. So, that's what I think about it anyway. So, missed the giant plot hole I have. Please tell me what the plot hole is. I'm happy to try to get over it. Hopefully it'll be super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Drop 2 says, I have James Blish's Dr. Mirabilis, Roger Bacon, A Case of Conscience, Black Easter Day After Judgment as PDF files. They're great and not sci-fi. I'll look and see if I have them. I have a whole bunch of stuff. I have at least 1,000 ebooks. A huge chunk of them are Blish's. Not a huge chunk, but I mean, it's all this Star Trek stuff. It's a lot of his other stuff. I'll check and see if I have those, so thanks for letting me know. So what's my plot hole, Marshall? I've got to know. What have I screwed up? This is a pitch meeting. We are all free to, throw things out. If I can fix the plot hole for ITC Entertainment before they come to me. If star X is the closest one to source point, the next jump will be star Y, but then star X is the closest star, jumping between stars forever. Okay. I'll techno-babble away that somehow. Maybe just make it that they don't know where the hell they're going to end up. It's not a question of distance. It's pure luck. The only thing that they know is they're not going to land, and this is more for convenience for us, for scientific convenience. They're not going to land in the middle of the solar system. They're going to land way outside of it. Something having to do with gravity. Techno-babble it away. Something to do with gravity somewhere, somehow. But yeah, all we know is that it's just random where they're going to come out. Just know that it's not going to be in the middle of the solar system, because that was always stupid. If you have something the size of the moon passing by a planet, it's going to be catastrophic both for the planet and the moon. Gravity, tides, etc. That was dumb. So for me, it's like land them outside the solar system, let them use these incredibly fast gravity drive eagles to go and explore a given planet. Just techno-babble it out of the way. It's totally random where it shows up. It's not a question of distance. If they're outside Sirius, it's not like they're going to wind up on some star close to that. They could wind up in the galactic center. That'd be an interesting one. Show up close enough so that the radiation and the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy become an issue. Could be very interesting. Seems to me like there's a lot of story points in here. James Blish's As Torrent of Faces would be good to include. Sure. I mean, as I say, I did not get specific about any given episode. It's just sort of the overall story of the thing. Any given episode, you could do all kinds of interesting things. You don't even necessarily have to have the faith aspect come into it. There'd certainly be episodes where it did. It's just that, like I say, for me, Space 1999, that was the most interesting part. Yes, they could jump into a Lagrange point, Marcia says, assuming their velocity vector was right. Conceivably, yes. But again, that's kind of, that's kind of a luck thing. It requires some skill and attempt to do it. In this case, it's just like popping from the edge of gravity wells to the edge of other gravity wells without any regard to where they are. So, techno-babble it away. There's ways to do that. It's actually super easy. Barely an inconvenience. Let's check my time here. It's 10:10. I've been at this for only an hour. I'm amazed. I've only been at this for an hour. And it's, April 1st. It is 10:10, yeah. It's April 1st, and there's so much crap going on that's real, and you don't know what ain't. As I say, had a thing come on my, alerting me that we've got something going on in the Quad Cities that's bad, MK. Don't know where that's standing at the moment. And there was an officer involved shooting in Chicago today. Same deal. There was an armed 13-year-old who was shot, and everybody's going insane in Chicago. And that was not an April Fool's, sadly. There has, of course, been at least one more shooting, some kind of rioting and stuff down in Florida, which is not an April Fool's joke, sadly. Some very funny, and then some former senator went after my beautiful love interest, Gina Carano. Wasn't good enough for Disney and all the SJWs to decide that she's some kind of evil, fascist, nightmarish person. Now members of government have to go after her. If it was me, man, I would just so get a lawyer and see if you could get them for defamation or libel. Ugh. Though I am seriously considering putting a new T-shirt on my Teespring that says, Gina Carano did nothing wrong. Oh, God, yes. Starsheets player says Chicago doesn't care about the hundreds shot by fellow citizens. Oh, God, Chicago, I used to live in the area. I lived in the city for a while. Chicago is just a giant nightmare. Just a giant nightmare. I wouldn't want to live there again. It's just unsafe as all hell. Kind of always has been. Chicago, I always like to figure that, cities I've noticed, having been to various ones, tend to have their own sort of character to them. Chicago's always been kind of rough. The thing with Al Capone and all that during the Prohibition era was not unusual, put it that way. The city itself had always kind of been rough, and having Capone and stuff like that was obvious, but it wasn't unusual. You go to like Toronto, totally different kind of culture there. Los Angeles, very different kind of culture. New York City, I haven't spent much time there, but yeah. Marshall says, yay, Ethereum just broke $2,000 the second time. Wow, took long enough. I can subvert Marshall Presnell necessity for supergravitation encapsulation. Victor could disappear into a force field around the moon, circumvent shot. Maybe, but my whole thing here is that Victor died for all intents and purposes. The whole point of this, the complete disregard for what it did to the people, not only on Moonbase Alpha, but on Earth. If real life, if Earth's moon disappeared, that would be incredibly catastrophic and might very well end civilization on Earth. That could be an extinction level event, easily. So this was a complete, he just decided, I don't care. Probably never did actually care. But it just so happened that human interests aligned with his own. But then he got to a point where it's like, do I have a soul? Can I die? Not really. How can I find out these things? The only way I can find out is to die, so I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to do that. One way, take the moon completely away, and bingo, you've just separated yourself out. But disappearing into a force field, no, I don't think so. I'd want him just gone. Just gone. Without any regard whatsoever to the consequences. You'd probably have, in this universe, the asteroid belt would be the bastion of civilization in the solar system if you did that. Maybe Mars as well. But we're not going to talk about it or see it past season 1 because it's out there someplace. Marshall says, and why the bleeping Farcon did SpaceX launch a test Starship in almost zero visibility environment? Seeing it isn't important all of a sudden? No data with cameras and eyeballs? What the hell, Elon? Oh, yeah. I'm not up. I haven't been watching the SpaceX stuff that terribly closely. I know he's setting stuff up. I know he still blabbers on about Mars, not understanding the difficulties that lie in store for him, or not caring like the Hyperloop. But space travel stuff has been great. So. Starships player, going to have to go to big, but please look at your earlier comment on integrated weapons in the suits. I did see that, yes, and it does make a certain level of sense. It's a bit like the a shrunk down version of the combat suit in the real Starship Troopers, the book ones. So anyway, had fun listening to the pitch. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Again, ITC Entertainment, me and my viewers have come up with a great idea for a TV series for you. Please feel free to contact me. I will show run, but by God, I'm not going to write every episode. Marshall knows how that killed J. Michael Krasinski. Yes, the gorilla suits, exactly, Starships player. Good night. Good night. Great having you in as always. Yeah, ITC, you can call me. I'll show run from a distance. I will absolutely not write the episodes. First off, I'm not really qualified to do it. But secondly, we know from experience that it will kill you. Ain't gonna do it. Wouldn't be prudent at any juncture. Yeah, and in the real world here, SJWs have gone off about this and that. And it's, you get on April Fool's Day like today, and it's like, what's real? How can we tell what's freaking real? You could copy some kind of story out of Babylon B, and you wouldn't know. Babylon B came out today with an admission that everything they'd written was just like a big April Fool's joke. Like everybody didn't know that, But, they get quoted around so much and thrown out for people who don't understand what the format is. How the hell do you know the difference? It's exactly the same. Why not set the new Space 1999, Space 2199 on Mars or a gigantic asteroid? I thought about that. I thought about it very hard. But, when you're doing something like this, you got to keep to the original premise to some extent. That was one of the things I thought about is, okay, we're going to keep this on the moon. We're going to keep the same rough premise. The moon is gone from Earth's orbit. How can we make that happen? And the way that I thought you could make that happen, because we're just getting started now on looking at what's called quantum energy teleportation. I don't think we're going to make a faster than light drive out of it anytime soon. It may not even be possible. But it seemed like a good way to technobabble your way through it, put it that way. But I thought, there are some things you can't get rid of when you're doing a remake. If somebody was dumb enough to remake Casablanca, it's still going to have to be in Rick's Cafe. I don't think anybody's dumb enough to do that. Although they did actually try to do a Casablanca TV series, I think in the 80s or 90s. Guys, there's just some things you don't remake. Casablanca's one of them. But, if you're going to do something like that, you have to take, if you're going to be stupid and remake Charlie's Angels, you're going to have 3 hot chicks involved. That's the whole point of it. Marshall says, unsolved mystery in 2199. Same time the moon vanishes, Neptune also vanishes, never explained. I don't know, you could do a story about that. Not from the Earth perspective, but I suppose it happened. I mean, my whole point for doing this is Victor wants to die to see what goes on in the afterlife. But, you could decide that for some reason he yanked Neptune along with it. Have an episode where you meet Neptune. But if you're doing it from Earthbound perspective, you just never know. The series will never touch Earth after the end of season 1. It's just, they're gone. They don't know what happened. You can theorize that it may very well have wiped out the human race, but we don't know for sure. I suppose if you wanted to get into it, because the way quantum energy teleportation works right now is not actual teleportation. You're entangling these 2 atoms. One exists and one exists over there. And so that the changing the state in this atom represents a changing state over here. Could do it, like instead of taking the moon out of orbit, duplicated the moon with some of her mass somewhere else. Everybody's essentially dead and they don't know it. They've gone through an actual kind of teleportation that would result in a duplication of them. Do any of them have souls now? It's an interesting question to ask. Yeah, Alpha wouldn't know, just be perceived from Earth. Exactly. You'd never know. And in this series, you would never explore it because this is all about what happens to the moon and not to what happens on Earth. You just never see it. It'll never see it. Let's see, it's about 10:30, 10:20, something like that. Yeah, so, in terms of real life things that have happened, there have been some bad real life things. We're going to see a bunch of rioting in Chicago overnight. Same thing in Rock Island, Illinois, part of the Quad Cities. And because it's the Quad Cities, it could very easily bleed over into any of the other 3. Ain't looking forward to what that looks like in the morning. Drop of Truth says the whole series might end with the reveal that the whole plot was a holographic equivalent by Victor. I don't think I'd want to do that. It's too much, like Bobby Ewing coming out of the shower. I think it's a cheat to the audience, or like the end of Star Trek Enterprise. It's kind of a cheat to the audience to say, oh, this was all just a big VR thing. I had considered that. In point of fact, I'd thought about that. What if it's just a big VR thing? And I thought, no, that's kind of cheating to the audience to say everything we just seen 5 years worth of stories on didn't actually happen. It occurred to me, but I thought, no, that's a hell of a cheat. You can do some episodes, where people, probably before Victor's death, where people are involved in virtual realities. Maybe you find out an entire episode is someone's virtual reality in season 1. But I don't think you'd want the whole series to be that way. It would just be a huge cheat for the audience. They'd walk away going, you a-holes. I've watched this thing for 5 years. It's like the friggin' end of Lost. You know, it's terrible. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's a dream. Blur. Yes, exactly. It's if it's the whole series 5 years worth is a dream, that kind of sucks. Individual episodes maybe, but maybe one or two. But the entire series, God no, the audience would walk away so pissed off at you. You got to be at least kind. Yes, it actually happened. So maybe an individual episode here or there where, maybe something, I don't know how you do it, where you'd hook the audience, like a original in Star Trek, The Next Generation, a holodeck episode where you find out at the end, oh my God, this has all been inside the holodeck, something like that. Marshall says, everything in Babylon 5 was actually written by Emperor Virkato. Yes. Well, yes. But, I mean, you see at the tail end things that are happening with human civilization out to 1 million or so years in the future. In point of fact, I understand what JMS was going for there, in terms of, and he said it lots of times, this is just a snapshot of something that happened in history. It's like World War II. You do a World War II movie or a period of World War II. It's just a snapshot of human civilization. It certainly doesn't represent it overall. But when he had, Earth essentially destroy itself as part of the future history, I thought, we didn't learn a damn thing, did we? Sure, I understand that probably we might not. We'd make the same mistakes over and over, but that was unsatisfying part of it to me. Dropper 2 says, Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy ended with the revelation that it was actually only a book. Yeah, again, there's lots of examples where they've done that. I just think to do that to a viewer, if they stayed with you for 5 years, they're going to be really pissed to discover the whole thing was just a dream, more or less. Like I say, individual episodes, sure, but not the entire thing. Like I say, you look at the end of Star Trek Enterprise, and everybody asks themselves, I mean, it wasn't the intent of the producers, but everybody then asks themselves, Jesus, we never saw Chef during the entire series. Does that mean the entire series was just a hologram being run by Riker for some reason? It was a real bad way to end that series. And it pissed off the audience in a way that I think, finding out that an entire series is just a dream or a hologram or something is really unsatisfying. So I wouldn't do that. It's just too unsatisfying for the viewer. And it means all the stuff that they went through actually had no real stakes. When you're going to kill off more than half of a major city, like I do in the first couple of weeks of season 2, the stakes have got to be really high, and the audience has to feel it. And you don't want to cheapen that by saying, "Ha ha, it was just a dream," So I guess it's been about an hour and a half, and I have found that streams generally do better with viewers after the fact if the stream is a little bit shorter. So, not seeing a ton of stuff out in the comments, I guess that is all that I have to say about that. I would certainly love to keep the conversation going, particularly if you have ideas about how this could be better or, something like that. So please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I will certainly do my best to respond to them. So thanks for watching this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion and remake. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.